آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So today is day 4 of our Tajweed series, and inshallah today we're just going to start off with a quick recap of day 3. So last time when we had our Tajweed session, it was on Thursday, where we discussed idgham bi ghayri gunna. So initially we discussed that there were two different types of idgham, and the one that I want to emphasize right now is idgham bi ghayri gunna, which is the second type of idgham, which is idgham without any gunna. So Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah tells us in his poem, وَثَانِي إِدْغَامٌ بِغَيْرِ غُنَّةٍ فِي اللَّامِ وَالرَّا ثُمَّ كَرِّ غُنَّةٍ. So he tells us that the second type of idgham is idgham without gunna. And this only takes place with lam and ra, as we mentioned last class. Um, Basically, what we're going to do is we're still doing idgham whenever we see lam and ra, followed by or what comes after noon sakin or tanween. But in this case, we're not going to nasalize it, and we're not going to extend the sound in any way. So I have some examples that I shared last time too. كَلَّا لَئِن لَمْ يَنْتَهِ. So here we're still doing idgham. We're changing the sound of the noon and we're shifting it into the lam. لَئِن لَمْ. So we're not even pronouncing the noon. Instead, we're going straight to the lam. But there's no nasalization. We're not elongating the sound in any way. The same thing with the next example, where we have an example with the letter ra. فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. And then there's another point that Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah makes in his poem, in this line right here, where he says ثُمَّ كَرِّرَنَا. Karirana just refers to like the trilling of the ra sound. But what's important to note in this situation is that we're not going to make it very apparent that we're rolling the ra sound. Instead, it's going to be very subtle. So for instance, فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. So it's just like that subtle trilling, but we're not going to extend it. We're not going to prolong it in any way. It's just going to be a very subtle roll of the letter ra, and then we're just going to continue reciting. So the same thing with the last example, mir rabbihim. And so that's pretty much a recap of day 3, where we discussed idgham without gunna. So for today's class, inshallah, we're going to discuss the third rule of the rules of nun sakin and tanween. Because initially on the first day we mentioned that there are 4 rules in total. So alhamdulillah, we've reached to rule number 3, which is iqlab. So Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah, he tells us وَالثَّالِثُ الْإِقْلَابُ عِنْدَ الْبَاءِ مِيمًا بِغُنَّةٍ مَعَ الْإِخْفَاءِ. So there's a lot to unpack in this line right here. So we're just going to take one thing at a time, inshallah, break it down as much as we can. So he tells us that the third rule is iqlab. It's known as iqlab. And this takes place عند الباء, whenever there's a letter ba. So what we're talking about is any instance where we see the letter noon with a sukoon, and right after it there's the letter ba, either in the same word or in 2 consecutive words, or when you see any form of tanween, so the 2 fathas or the 2 dhammas or the 2 kasras, and then right after that there's a letter ba. So whenever that situation takes place, it's known as iqlab. And the word iqlab itself comes from the word qalb, which means the heart. And what it's referring to linguistically is how the human heart changes. Like, for example, one day you like something, and then the next day, you change your mind, your heart's not even inclined to that thing anymore. So what it basically means is that we're changing the letter. And more specifically, what happens is that we're changing the sound of the noon or the tanween into a meme. So Imam al-Jamzuri rahimahullah tells us himself, وَثَالِثُ الْإِقْلَابُ عِنْدَ الْبَاءِ مِيمًا بِغُنَّةٍ مَعَ الْإِخْفَاءِ. So there's a lot going on here that he's telling us. So the first thing is that the sound changes into a meme while doing ghunna. So we're nasalizing as well. And then we're also prolonging it. مع الإخفاء, with إخفاء. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on إخفاء because that's actually the fourth rule that we're going to talk about more in the next class, inshallah. So we're just going to hold off for on that for now. So in the meantime, what I want to focus on is this whole part that he says عند الباء, that this only takes place when you see the letter ba and the sound changes into a meme. So what I'm going to do is, inshallah, after the commercial break, we're going to talk more about some specific examples because this is more of something that is easier to understand when you actually see it and you hear it being implemented. So inshallah, we're just going to take a small break and then we'll continue right after.
Sheikh Abdul Hakim, a frequent speaker at MCMC, said something very profound. He said, "I've been to hundreds of masajid all over the country, and whenever I've seen people raise their hands in response to an appeal, there's always this big smile on their face." Subhanallah, just let that sink in. It's like, imagine if someone jumps in a swimming pool, it is 100% guaranteed that this person will get wet. Similarly, once we donate for the sake of Allah, it's like jumping in a pool filled with happiness. You are guaranteed to be drenched in happiness. Brothers and sisters, we are reaching out to you with an urgent appeal regarding MCMC operations. There has been no Jummah collection for almost 2 months now, and now with the masjid closed during Ramadan, it is indeed a huge financial burden. Ramadan is the time we collect funds that enable us to do hundreds of programs throughout the year. We collect funds to improve our security, to improve the overall facility, and to do outreach work throughout the year. Times are tough, and no doubt there are hundreds of good causes to donate, but upkeeping your home has to be the #1 priority. If MCMC is where you pray your daily prayers, if this is the place where you pray Jummah, Taraweeh, Eid, if this is the place where your kids learn about Allah and His Messenger, then this is your home. This is your primary responsibility to maintain your home. Please visit mcmcnj.org/themasjid and support and upkeep your home. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family and fill your heart with happiness.
All right, we're back. So, as we were mentioning before, the rule of iqlab takes place whenever there's a letter ba, and what precedes it is the noon or the tanween. And what happens is that the sound changes into the sound of a meme, and we're also going to nasalize and extend and prolong the sound. So now we'll go more into some details and some examples, inshallah. So the first thing that is important to take note of is that when it comes to iqlab, there's actually two different opinions with regards to its pronunciation. Well, not really pronunciation, but how it's executed. So the first opinion, and by the way, both of these opinions are correct. You can choose whichever one you want, or it really just comes down to what your teacher teaches you. So the first opinion is that when you make the sound of iqlab, so for example, let's take a look at the first example, كَلَّا لَيُنبَذَنَّ. In the first example, the opinion, well, one of the opinions is that you must close your mouth while you're pronouncing the iqlab. So la yumbadanna. So here we see that we're basically just skipping over the noon. We're not even pronouncing it at all. We're just going to turn it into the sound of a meme. And then right after that, there's the ba. So we're just going to go straight to the meme, but at the same time, we're going to close our mouth. We're not going to open it in any way. So la yumbadanna. But then the second opinion, which is also a valid opinion, is that while you're making the sound of iqlab, you're not going to close your mouth entirely. Rather, you're going to keep it open a little bit. This is to basically emphasize that there is a noon there, yet we're just pronouncing the meme because there's iqlab taking place. So this would be pronounced similarly, but what's going to happen is that you're going to have your mouth slightly open. So it'd be كَلَّا لَيُنبَذَنَّ. And this is something that you can practice as you're reciting. So I have some more examples. The next example is مِن بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ وَدَمٍ. And the example after that, كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا هَنِيئًا بِمَا. Um, so basically, this takes place whenever we see a noon with a sukun on top, or as in the last example, it takes place whenever there's a tanween, and in this case specifically, it's the two fathas, or otherwise known as fathatain. And this is definitely something that happens quite frequently in the Quran. Um, and like I've mentioned over and over in the previous classes, the best way we can try to learn these rules and implement and actually understand them is by implementing them as we're reciting our daily recitation of the Quran. So with that, I'll conclude, inshallah. Next week or next class, I'd say, we're going to be discussing iqlab with some more examples, and at the same time, we're going to begin talking about ikhfa, which is going to be the last of the four rules of noon sakin and tanween. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الصلاة خير من النوم الصلاة خير من النوم ألا صلوا في بيوتكم ألا صلوا في بيوتكم الله أكبر الله أكبر لا